Hey YouTube, it's your buddy Drew from Living History's Mysteries at the Midwest Parahistoric Society. You know, for millennia, people have been documenting strange objects in the sky. It was only up in recent years, within the last century, that people have actually started calling them UFOs or UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. These things were documented not only in historic literature and paintings by some of the most prestigious people in world history, but also by the common man, documenting this stuff in diaries and things, and even through, you know, the last couple of centuries and here into the 21st century. Documentation, sightings, contact continues. It was only here in the last 70 years or so, though, that people started documenting physical contact. People started thinking, dreaming, feeling abduction. I know a lot of people guffaw, ha-ha, shake their head at the thought, what would an advanced race want to study humans for, being so uncivilized? But if you look back in the last couple of years, the government has finally come forward and released information, thousands and thousands of pages that at one point in time were top secret. And now even our world governments are acknowledging the fact that UAPs and UFOs and advanced civilizations from elsewhere in the universe truly exist. And just 5 months ago, the Pentagon released thousands of pages on UFO contacts, sightings, and abductions.
Thousands of previously classified documents regarding UFOs have now been released to the public, and some of the stories include alien abductions.
Today, we're going to take a look at a little video that came out a short time ago talking about abduction cases. This is some pretty interesting stuff, and a lot of it rang true with me. After the video, we're going to talk about my own personal experiences. They're documented. It's some scary shit. Stay tuned.
I live with it every day. I can't plan very far. I don't know if I'm going to be here tomorrow.
It's potentially the most important event that's yet happened in human history.
It just blows everything out of the water that you've ever thought the world to be.
Some people say, oh, you just want to belong to some kind of special group or whatever. You want 5 minutes of fame. I'm sorry, I hate to tell you this. This isn't a group that you want to belong to.
When they come to me or another competent researcher and they learn what has been happening to them through their own memories, that's it. That's the end of the road.
The only thing that I find important is that people know the truth.
Although sightings of unidentified flying objects littering the heavens have been recorded for hundreds of years, claims of alien abductions have only been prominent since the 1950s. Since then, aliens have been presented to us as everything from silly, harmless creatures to terrifying invaders set on destroying us all. But those who say they have seen them say the reality is vastly different than what we've been shown.
But nobody's captured what they are. And I think that's almost impossible, because they're not just, small beings with big heads.
Maybe that's why people think we're crazy, because they see movies like that. They're like, oh God, these people think that it's real? Like, how stupid are they?
A number of these events, some of the most important, have happened in broad daylight, and with multiple witnesses, and nobody was playing any spooky music. I mean, it's dramatic enough. You don't have to tart it up.
Each year, countless numbers of people claim that they have been the victims of alien abductions, and that number appears to be increasing. They say that they are removed from their earthly location, brought aboard ships, and exposed to invasive procedures and other traumas that scar them for life. And both abductees and researchers alike say it can happen to anyone.
I've had 8 psychiatrists come to me about their own abduction experiences so far. Police officers, army officers, plumbers, farmers, you name it.
There is nothing in a person's life which is unique for being an abductee.
Dr. David Jacobs, a professor at Temple University, is one of the foremost authorities on alien abduction. With more than 1,000 hours of interviews with suspected abductees, Jacobs says abduction is clearly a lifelong process.
Most abductees have known something is wrong. The ones that we see have known something is wrong for years and years. They lead lifetimes of odd experiences. Most abductees wish to God that they weren't caught up in it, wish that they weren't abductees.
It's really hard to put your reputation and your face out there and say something that, you wish wasn't true.
Now living in New York, Randy grew up in small-town Massachusetts. His dad ran a gas station and his mom was a nurse. He was the middle of 3 children. At first glance, he would appear to be completely average. And he was, until they came.
Their bodies were pretty skinny, frail, and they had very large heads. So they came over and used this rod-like device on my neck.
Childhood remembrances of alien visits are shared by Sarah as well. Preferring to stay anonymous, her voice and appearance are disguised.
While the society is the way it is in terms of how it treats this phenomenon, that's the only way anyone could be. Anyone that has ever come out and not been anonymous has had a lot of negative repercussions in their life.
The epitome of a modern, successful professional woman, Sarah is now happily married, well-educated, and a librarian from the eastern U.S.
This was my earliest memory of something terrifying, looking out this window with my sister, and I can see an enormous ship, circular in shape, low, that covered almost like that entire area, and it looked like this flower I've seen, and I can still see it now. It was brilliant, and I remember little beings, and this is what I remember saying: please let us remember this time.
Lives in picturesque Nanaimo, British Columbia with her husband Brian. Her days are filled with loving family and friends and creative endeavors. She grew up in a little village in northwestern Ontario, and her family of 13 lived an isolated life. It was with family at the age of 3 that she first encountered a UFO in broad daylight.
And I was sitting on a swing when I realized that when I looked across the field, that there was a craft hovering on top of my brothers and sisters. It was a roundish shape, oval shaped, and it was just sitting in one spot, hovering over the children.
Sables is a devoted mother from Kelowna, British Columbia.
I'm a normal, average, everyday person who's rational, holding down a good job. I had gone to school, university for 3 years. I had a diploma working with special needs children as a TA. I was very functional and healthy, and I was, your neighbor.
Karina recalls frightening memories from her young life in Quebec at 5 years old.
Then all of a sudden I would see this very scary face there floating in the window looking at me. And it was kind of gray, no fur, no hair, no ears. It had large black almond-shaped eyes, maybe a slit for a mouth, no nose to speak of. And I would just be terrified, and I would just pull the blankets up over my head.
These experiences are much more widespread than anybody thinks, and much more somehow easily concealed even from ourselves.
Bud Hopkins, well known as both artist and alien abduction expert, has spoken with thousands of potential abductees.
A huge number of people remember consciously most of the event. It all depends on the person. And as I say, if you're dealing with children, they're remembering the whole thing.
It was when I was in this metal-like chair where two other beings were doing this thing to me. They had this long, coiled, like wire, and they were putting it in my left nostril and sliding it up there, and it was extremely painful.
Randy then remembers being dropped back into his bed and frantically running through the dark house to his parents' room, screaming for them to wake up.
So, my dad got his gun. It was an intruder in the house, and then my mom got the flashlight. I told them that they were not human beings. They were something else. And I remember my dad telling my mom not to encourage me to talk about it.
I would get the same answer. It was always, it must be a wildcat from the forest out back behind our place. And I kept coming back to my father, but the kitty had no ears.
And it's real to you. They will tell you, no, it's not real to you. You just imagine this. And so you're sort of being forced, brainwashed, as it were, to put this on some shelf and to somehow handle it as if it's not a real experience.
In teenage years, abductions begin to have a much more invasive nature. And abduction researchers say at that age, females are taken more frequently for their reproductive role.
Eggs are taken from women. Fetuses are implanted in women. Fetuses are extracted from women.
Something, I couldn't put a face to whoever it was, doing something with this long needle into my abdomen. And when I woke up in the morning, I felt pain in that area. So I looked down and found that I had almost like dry blood. It wasn't quite dry, that filled the belly button area. And then after I cleaned it, I noticed that there was a little puncture mark.
Randy was also noticing after effects of his excursions, like headaches and flashbacks, so he went to doctors for answers.
I went through all kinds of stuff, CAT scans, MRIs, 48-hour EEGs, and they never found anything.
And talking to doctors about the true cause was out of the question, as he discovered after confiding in a school psychologist.
And then I came back the next visit and I said that didn't really happen because of the reaction I saw on his face. That I was going to be put in some special program or hospitalized or something, and that's what made me shut up even more. Deep in my heart, I knew it was true, but there's a part that doesn't want it to be real. So I was like, okay, something's wrong with me. There's got to be something wrong with me.
I stood up when I saw this photo in the middle of the hall, and I pointed at the photo and I said, are humans taken aboard these things? And she turned around, looked at me, and she said yes. And I just blurted out I was aboard one of those things.
Many young abductees continue to struggle with more and more odd events as they become adults. In 2003, Karina Sables was driving with a girlfriend when they saw an odd green sphere in the sky. Then she saw something even stranger across the road.
I saw these 5 sets of eyes standing there. And my first thought was, oh my God, it's cougars. And then once reality checked in, I noticed that, the eyes were too far off the ground and the eyes were much too large and shaped different. I tried to scream at her and it's like my voice wouldn't come out.
Eventually fleeing the scene, the women made a startling discovery. According to their clock, more than an hour had passed in what seemed like just minutes. Symptoms of nausea and nosebleeds followed, and her friend had a strange souvenir, a burn mark that a doctor said resembled a radiation burn.
When it first happened, this mark on her, the burn mark on her back here was about like this. And so this is quite a while after as it's trying to heal up.
For Randy, confirmation of alien existence came at age 23.
April 10th, 1990. My whole life changed after that night.
He says aliens came for him again, and their threatening nature seemed no less scary as an adult than when he was 10.
The one closest to me had this same rod thing in his arm and his hand. I thought that was a knife or something that was going to kill me. So it hit my neck here, and then I felt like everything, like I was being systematically shut down.
One of Sarah's key adult experiences was shared with a friend while vacationing in Alberta, Canada, and started with an afternoon nap.
We both woke up at the same time, and we proceeded, did you see that strange little man? And he said, yeah. And he was describing him as a dwarf. We had different descriptions of him, and we were having an argument about what he had in his hand. And Clyde said to me, he goes, he was coming at you with a knife. And I was trying to stop him, and I couldn't. I said, no, it wasn't a knife. It was a long needle.
In 1989, Peniche too experienced a revealing trip with a friend. While driving in separate cars through Saskatchewan, they saw what appeared to be a roadside forest fire.
Next thing I know, I'm waking up. My head is in the steering wheel like that. I'm waking up from a deep sleep. And I look, and it's starting to be dawn. It's starting to get light. And I look around, and I notice the field where the fire was, there was no fire. There was no burnt grass, no burnt trees, no nothing.
Her friend became upset and was extremely agitated as she pointed over Peniche's car.
She's not so pleasant words told me what to do with myself, and that she didn't want to have anything to do with me afterward.
Before storming off, the lady made a claim that Peniche found hard to believe.
There was a UFO hovering over your car. It finally dawned on me that something happened to me. And then that's when I realized that I had an experience of missing time.
Randy has specific memories of being on board a craft.
What I remember is being on a table, like a metallic table that was pretty cold. Yeah, couldn't move. They were busy doing things to me. There was a machine that seemed to operate on its own. And they took genetic material from me. It makes me mad. Makes me angry. What happened and what they did.
When they're on the table, there's a series of procedures that are performed on them, both physical, mental, and, unfortunately, reproductive.
It's really difficult to have to remember this particular situation because I can actually feel the sensations of being looked at. The eyes being looked at, the nose, your vessels, the cavities in your nose are being searched, and your mouth is being probed, and your mouth is just pushed down like this, and it's like something being stuck in your throat.
It wasn't until a few years later, while attending a presentation about UFOs, when things began to make sense.
And I stood up when I saw this photo in the middle of the hall, and I pointed at the photo and I said, "Are humans taken aboard these things?" And she turned around, looked at me, and she said, "Yes." And I just blurted out, I was aboard one of those things.
For Karina as well, it took a long time before she believed that she was being abducted by aliens.
I was thinking I was going crazy. I was thinking I had bad nightmares, vivid nightmares. I didn't know what to think.
Then one summer night, while sitting outside with a friend, she saw a boomerang-shaped ship the size of a football field overhead. While her friend ran inside for cover, Karina was determined to stay.
I only stood there for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, if that, and then I watched it just disappear. It was there and then it wasn't. And I went back into my place, and he was just coming out, and he said, "Where have you been?" And he was like all worried and everything, and he said, "I went outside, I looked for you everywhere and you weren't anywhere." And he said, "You've been gone at least 45 minutes. Where did you go?" And I said, "I didn't go anywhere."
I had to get in touch with somebody, and I called information under UFOs, and I finally got in touch with the Center for UFO Research in Alexandria, Virginia. I'll never forget the conversation. He called me back, and he said a couple things to me that just made me go, "Oh my God, he knows what I'm talking about."
Karina contacted UFO BC and was told there had been 32 calls about the same UFO. They decided to send out an investigator.
That was the first time for me that something hit home, and I went, "Oh my God, this is real. These things haven't been dreams or nightmares. They've actually happened."
Getting that confirmation was, relieving in some way, knowing that I wasn't crazy, but also made me sick as hell just to know that, oh my God, this is real, and it's happening all over the place. I mean, everything seemed unimportant compared to the fact that there's another species out there that's coming here and doing things to us.
How was I going to stop these things from coming again? What am I going to do now?
You know, you're not alone, and you're not making this up, and you're not crazy. And if you are, there's a lot of other people that are also living that same world with you.
Once abductees realize something truly odd is happening, they begin to reach out to others for answers. Dr. David Jacobs, a leading U.S. abduction researcher, says they often try standard therapy, religion, or New Age groups without satisfaction.
When they come to me or another competent researcher and they learn what has been happening to them through their own memories, that's it. This is the end of the road. They know this is what it is.
In his home office in Philadelphia, Jacobs interviews and, if necessary, hypnotizes abductees to find answers.
A state of relaxation. Take you back to where the training that you had.
I wanted to know what was going on, and none of the other explanations worked anymore, and I was sort of ready.
It's as if the aliens are able to block your memory some way or other, perhaps akin to some sort of hypnotic procedure. We don't know how they do it, but that we have the same procedure to unlock the block and get the memory back.
I don't ever want to do hypnosis again, only because there was a flood of memories that came up after hypnosis. It just came on too fast and too quick.
There's a visceral, emotional sense to it when you're remembering some of this. So, some of it's painful, some of it's you're in awe, some of it's you're angry. All those normal emotions that you would go through, you feel that.
Your imagination can fill in greater horrors than necessarily happened. So in a certain sense, you gain control by knowing exactly what the danger level was and so on. So it's therapeutically, it's so helpful.
But oftentimes, abductees become targets because of the debate over the relevant use of hypnosis. Many people claim it's an unreliable source of retrieving information.
If it's tried and true in many respects, and it has been used to solve a number of crimes, then there's nothing the matter with it.
Jacobs says that serious researchers use checks and balances, such as posing misleading questions to make sure the information is not tainted.
If they say yes to the misleading questions that you know are wrong, you have to be extremely careful with whatever else they say.
If it's about an argument of whether this is happening or not, there's plenty of people who haven't had any hypnosis who can tell you point blank about what they saw, and I'm one of those people.
Whether or not abductees undergo hypnosis, most of them seek out others who have had similar experiences.
I decided to start a support group. It's a place where, people who've experienced similar things can come and discuss their experiences without being ridiculed and without being laughed at and things like that.
There was a lot of people who were lawyers or business owners or, pretty prominent in society who were at those meetings, who were having, abductions take place.
Validation is a great thing. It kind of says to you, you're not alone, and you're not making this up, and you're not crazy. And if you are, there's a lot of other people that are also living that same world with you.
They had stories that were like mine, that they had to keep it from their friends and their work. Basically, live a double life, sort of.
The stress of living in one world while dealing with the trauma of another often took its toll.
I had panic attacks, breakdowns. I I tended to isolate myself.
I was in conflict with in a lot of areas of my life. There was a lot of stress. It was stressful on my family as well, not just me.
When these things start coming into your life and they affect you physically, they affect you on an emotional level, mental level, spiritual level, it hits every aspect of the human being. I've lost jobs because of the things I was going through. It was happening so often, so much at one time, that I couldn't function.
I was in tears a lot. And people would ask me what's going on, and I ended up telling them I lost somebody in my family. You know, I couldn't tell them what really happened.
Telling people about this can be a very disastrous situation. The consequences of it are almost never good.
Marriages break up. Families don't understand. Friends are lost. And jobs are put into jeopardy.
You're going to want to go tell everybody, and really you want to think about that for a while before you do that, because not everyone's going to be open and receptive to this.
I know I have not talked much with you. I know that I've not shared anything with you, but you want to know why? Because I guess in a way I was afraid.
Yet some people do decide to tell their families and friends, and even the public at large.
People were terrified to speak out about it. And that partly made my decision to speak out about it.
When I decided to go public with this was because for the first year and a half, I was so consumed with fear. I was almost totally paralyzed. And it started being difficult to carry out daily functions.
I realized this was going to change everything. Everything. And I had no idea how I underestimated that. Health-wise, financially, relationship-wise, all across the board, I've paid a price for it.
This is something that my son made when he was between 9 and 10 years old. At school, they had gotten some plaster, and they asked the children to make whatever they wanted to with this plaster, and this is what my son made in school. And that's when the teacher actually phoned me and said, we need to talk. Some people say, you just want to belong to some kind of special group or whatever. You want 5 minutes of fame. Well, I'm sorry, I hate to tell you this. This isn't a group that you want to belong to.
Whether it's a need for attention or just plain delusions, researchers David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins look for signs.
That's the number one thing you first look at. Are these people crazy or what? And this has not been the case.
There's no, litmus test. You plug in your little finger into a machine and say, oh yeah, abductee, non-abductee. There's nothing like that. We have to ask a lot of questions and spend a lot of time with people. They have to have a certain kind of stability.
But in extreme circumstances, even the most rational of people can be pushed to the edge.
At the time, I had a couple of suicidal thoughts here and there. I wasn't carrying them out, of course, but nevertheless, I was thinking about it, and I didn't want to do that to the children.
Once. And it was after going out in the media. And I was, I felt like my whole life was gone.
Some abductees look to traditional therapy for help in dealing with their struggle, but have a difficult time finding doctors to be open.
I had a therapist laugh at me. I've had quite an experience with therapists.
One can be very hurt by going to the wrong person. And that's why we're trying to get material out to therapists to at least allow the possibility of this being a real factor in someone's life.
I think anybody that this has happened to needs help. It just blows everything out of the water that you've ever thought the world to be.
One of the things that abduction interferes with is relationships. Revealing you are an abductee can be a very delicate process.
I was rather worried that if I didn't broach the topic with him, we were going to have a strange event like I had with the guy I was seeing just before him, and he would bolt.
I think it was very early on. She asked me how I felt about UFOs and whether I believed in them or not. And she told me she did. And later on, she told me more.
You get to know somebody and you like them and whatever, and bang, I'm a UFO abductee, and they sit there and their jaw falls on the floor and they say, okay, well, see you around, sweetheart, you know?
I don't know if he actually believed it, but he was willing to tolerate it.
I thought, wow, this is kind of, out there. I've never met anybody that thought they were an abductee. So, but I felt very strongly about Sarah at the time, and I felt that she was extremely sane and very, very, very intelligent. So, I thought that if she had a feeling about this sort of thing, then there was something behind it.
And they must deal with the possibility of their loved ones suffering a similar fate.
I would love them to see something so they understood what I go through. But at the same time, I don't want to have them to go through what I went through.
And some of these memories are painful for her, and they come to the surface every once in a while. Sometimes I don't know how to console her, so sometimes I feel helpless.
The parent-child relationship is even more complex.
I didn't want kids, so I want to subject him to this.
I have a lot of reservations around having kids because of that.
The abduction phenomenon is intergenerational. That is to say, a person is an abductee because their mother or their father was an abductee.
Karina had to face this head-on when her 3-year-old daughter recounted a strange visit.
She said, then they took me up and somewhere, and I was in this room, and then this pumpkin head man came in, and she said, I'm really scared of him. I don't like him. He's mean, and he hurts me. And I said, who's the pumpkin head man? And she says, well, he says he's the doctor. This is something that my son made when he was between 9 and 10 years old. At school, they had gotten some plaster, and they asked the children to make whatever they wanted to with this plaster. And this is what my son made in school. And that's when the teacher actually phoned me and said, we need to talk.
Karina sometimes felt unwillingly compelled to involve the children in odd outings.
In my head, I would hear, get the children ready. And I have a lot of guilt with this, so I'm sorry, this is really difficult for me. But, I'm sorry. So, I would take the kids and wrap little blankets around them. And I would just get in the vehicle, and I didn't know where we were going. And I would find myself driving in some location that I didn't even know where we were going or where we were headed. I had no way of stopping it. We couldn't talk to anyone about this because people were going to think that we were crazy, and they were going to try and take us apart from each other. And so I said, we can only talk about it within the 3 of us. When you see that fear eyes. And that aloneness that they have of dealing with this stuff, that's the hardest part for me. And
even now, as an adult, Karina's daughter finds it difficult to speak about.
I don't like talking about it. I don't like listening to it. I get angry and stuff.
Both she and Karina believe they have suffered great losses because of the aliens, including even pregnancy.
I just knew that something was wrong, and I had an ultrasound done, and everything was gone. There was no fetus, no sign, there was nothing. Everything was gone, and I don't remember losing a fetus or anything.
I've had several miscarriages in the past 2 years. Like, I'll be pregnant for 4 months, and then all of a sudden I'll wake up and it'll be flat and it'll be gone and there'll be no blood, nothing. And I'll go get an ultrasound and it won't even show that I was pregnant. And the doctors can't explain it because I went for an ultrasound a couple weeks earlier and it showed that I was pregnant. So I called my mom and I started crying. I was like, they took my baby.
Although Peniche's children have no memories of abductions themselves, they feel her experiences have deeply affected them.
Yeah, there is a lot of anger in there in regards to how capable she was of being a mother, you know, during that time when she was actually really, really struggling, especially with a lot of health issues. And, you know, it was really difficult for her that my sister and I, you know, ended up getting shut out quite a bit, quite often, because she wasn't able to cope.
I ended up with a bladder infection. I had unexplained rashes on my skin, little red bumps. I had cracks and sores on the inside of my mouth, and vomiting, nausea.
We ended up waking up with bruises and scratches and burn marks.
How could I burn myself in my sleep? I don't know.
In order to deal with this physical aftermath, abductees like Sarah try to make sense of how the beings could make them suffer so.
The scientists that study animals out in the wild, and they might put a tag in them or put a tag on them, and they're doing it for the animal's good. Now, I have this empathy for those creatures because I think that's the gulf that separates us from these beings that are visiting us and doing that. I think they have their own reasons for doing it, and I think that they look at us like we look at those animals.
They're not mapping our defenses. They're not interested in our computers. They're not just experimenting oddly to see what makes us tick, but they're trying to produce a mix of themselves and ourselves.
After many years of study, abduction researchers Professor David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins believe they have pieced together why abductees are being taken.
They're not mapping our defenses. They're not interested in our computers. They're not just experimenting oddly to see what makes us tick, but they're trying to produce a mix of themselves and ourselves.
The program is manufacturing these children, these hybrids. This is a reproductively oriented phenomenon.
And there was all these babies in like these tube things that went from the ceiling to the floor. And kind of like a ruddy blue gel stuff.
They were probably hundreds, and there were all these little fetuses and things floating in this liquid. And I couldn't believe what I was looking at, and I remember thinking, oh my God, where are all these children from? What are these poor babies? What are they doing?
Very often, the person is handed a small child, baby even, and asked to bond with that baby, to hold it. And they're made to feel that this is their offspring. No way of knowing whether it is or not. And it's as if the aliens believe that there's something magical about the human touch, that they will somehow invigorate these little infants and toddlers and so on that don't seem to be doing very well.
He just kept telling me to hold all these babies, and he's like, hold this one and come see these ones. And he had dark brown, wavy hair. He had huge eyes. Yeah, he was very fragile looking, very tiny. And I was told that this child was mine.
I felt a deep love for that creature, like I would love, a son or a daughter. And I wanted to hug it.
I was saying, like, those are my babies. How could you do that to me? Like, you took my babies. And I just left it. I really have no choice. Just left it.
And I feel like I have a child out there. I don't know where, but that was part of me, and that's what they took from me.
Researchers believe these children are all part of the alien agenda.
They're going to be integrating into the society, which is basically what they have been telling abductees. And sometimes they just say it straight out. I had to wait a long time till I got lots and lots of these accounts before I would go forward with this.
We know what the procedures are, we know how they go about it, but when they make these beings and plant them amongst us, what next? And that's the part we don't know. You hear New Age people say, oh, they're coming here because they're spiritually evolved. And so I think that, if anything, they're learning from us spiritually. They learn something about us, and I think they really want that in some weird way.
On my darker days, that we're a resource for them. Like a farm. It's just a really big one, and we don't realize we're on it. And on my better days, I feel like that maybe they're trying to reach us in some way.
Whether or not they know why the aliens are coming, abductees and their families still have to cope on a daily basis.
How do I deal with it? The best that I can.
I talk to my mom, and then I just forget about it. Or I just forget about it, and I get angry. You train your mind to stay in the moment. It was the only way that I could live and survive.
I hold her, I hug her, I talk to her, I try to make her feel better and tell her that now is now, and that those memories that she has, that's exactly what they are. They're memories.
I keep really busy. That's my coping mechanism. I take photographs, I play the piano, I tune pianos, I write, and I do things from when I wake up till I cannot stay up any longer.
You can't be paralyzed by the fear. You have to keep going. So you get up, you cook a meal, you go to work, you do this, you do that, because you have to. You don't have a choice.
If you just totally block it out, your mind just makes you think nothing's happening.
I would say I spend 99.9% of my life not thinking about this, ever worrying about it, ever, because that's the only way to get by.
And so you can't let that 1/1000th of a percent that's been taken over by them to rule the rest of your life.
But when I'm alone, it's not fun. And that I would give up in a second, or would wish not to have. To be safe in my bed at night and feel like I'm going to be okay and that nothing can come in and take me, and would like to be living that dream again, because I'm not.
And as they cope, abductees learn to accept themselves and hopefully regain some peace.
The more of us that come out, the more of us tell our stories, the more people will understand, the more people will know.
If you were telling me this story, I wouldn't expect you to believe me either, because you haven't had anything that can personally prove it to you. I am just somebody telling you a story, and that's okay if you don't believe me.
It doesn't matter who believes what I know. All I know is I know because I saw. And this is what I experienced. And I don't have to spend the rest of my life trying to convince anybody what I went through. I know what I went through.
Welcome back. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I myself have had experiences that I didn't know how to identify. They started when I was only 3 years old, standing in front of a huge picture window in an old house that we were renting as our house was getting finished. This picture window went from about 6 inches above the floor all the way to the 10-foot ceilings. And I remember standing there as a small child and watching an object up in the sky right above our road. Of course, as most parents do, my parents wanted to have me checked out. Find out if their kids lost his crackers or not. The psychologist that I talked to couldn't find a flaw in the story, and it actually came out from him to my parents that he too had experiences as a small child that led into his early adulthood. Things really came to fruition back in 2016 when I developed type 2 diabetes and went into diabetic shock, and I started having dreams while I was in the coma of being in places, seeing things, hearing things that, of course, my doctors and stuff, they call that coma psychosis. Most people who delve into or treat the abduction scenario individuals called that straight up BS. What I described, what I seen, what I heard has been documented over and over and over again by hundreds of people. Seeing myself across the room even after I came home from the hospital, when I came out of the coma, seeing myself hovering 8 or 10 feet away from my bed with strange glowing figures around me. It wasn't until I actually made a noise or made a movement that all of a sudden I would wake up and I was back in my own bed again. So, is it the mind playing tricks? Who knows? But like I said, these situations, these abductions occur hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times every year. And they're coming even more so now. Who knows what's really behind it? We're nothing but simple minds trying to figure out what's happening in the universe. Maybe one day we'll figure it out, but who knows? But that's all I got for you guys today. As always, I'd like to ask you to please like the video, share it out, like-minded people, friends, family. Definitely subscribe to the channel. It's free, don't cost anything to subscribe. And as always, ding that little bell. That way you'll know when new videos come out, and we prove time and time again, you never know what we're going to talk about. So until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. God bless you, God love you, we do. We'll see you on down the road.